بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك فلك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى ترث الأرض ومن عليها أنت خير الوارثين نويت تعلم تعليم وتذكر تذكير ونفع انتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة الرسول صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ودعاء للهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. We're still looking at the tradition of Sayyidina Ubadah ibn Samit radiallahu ta'ala anhu of the Imams of Banu Khazraj radiallahu ta'ala anhu from amongst the Ansar as they raised the bay'at of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And there are going to be very few of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam who can stake a claim to being present in all of these allegiances, oaths of allegiances that were taken with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. In terms of the major oaths of allegiances, what we have is what's called Bay'atul Aqabatul Ula. You have the oath of allegiance of Aqaba, the first oath of allegiance of Aqaba. As we made mention of that ordinarily, it's called Bay'atul Nisa. It's called the allegiance of women, and that's going to take place in the 12th year after the Bi'tha, after the prophecy of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The second allegiance in question is what we mentioned is called Bay'atul Rijal, Bay'atul Harb. It's called the allegiance of war, the allegiance of war, and that will take place in the 13th year after the actual prophecy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, only 3 months prior to his migration to Medina to Munawwara sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you have the third bay'ah, and the third bay'ah, notable bay'ah, is considered the greatest of the bay'at that took place in the age of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is called Bay'atul Ridwan. It's called Bay'atul Ridwan. That's the one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions inside of his book subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِذْ يُبَيْعُونَكَ تَحْتَ شَجَرَةٍ, when they took the allegiance with you beneath the acacia tree. يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ, the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above their hand. Okay, that's the greatest of all the bay'at. It's called Bay'at al-Ridwan. And that bay'at there is distinguished from the previous two, in that the previous two bay'at, Bay'at al-Aqabat al-Ula wa Bay'at al-Aqabat al-Thaniya, i.e. the bay'at of women and the bay'at of war, that is exclusively the Ansar and the Imams of Medina who were given bay'ah with the Prophet ﷺ, whereas Bay'at al-Ridwan is both the Muhajirun as well as the Ansar. It's both the Muhajirun as well as the Ansar who give bay'ah with the Prophet ﷺ. Although what is notable is that the riwayat of Bay'at al-Ridwan, it comes from the Ansar. And in particular it comes from that great woman from amongst the Ansar whose name is Nasiba bint Ka'ab radiallahu ta'ala anha warda, who was also present, as we made mention of. There were women who were present inside of the bay'ah of war. And of the great woman, the greatest of them who was present inside of the bay'ah of war was this woman called Nasiba bint Ka'ab radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. And then the ulama have ikhtilaf about the fourth bay'ah. And that's where sort of this hadith comes in, that the ulama radiallahu anhum wardahum are at odds as to whether this account of saying Ubadah ibn Samit radiallahu anhu wardah, does it relate to Bay'at al-Aqabat al-Ula? Is he speaking about the first bay'ah that was taken with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you said, 12 men, 12 men in the 12th year after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophecy, or is this in reference to a bay'ah that will take place after Fath Mecca? And so after the conquest of Mecca, bay'ah once again is taken with the Prophet ﷺ. And what seems to be the rajih, the strongest opinion in that regard, is that the hadith of Sayyidina Ubadah radiallahu anhu warda, that it refers to the bay'ah that was taken after Fath Mecca. Okay, radiallahu anhu, because the version of this tradition inside of Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, after the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, bay'uni ala an la tushriku billahi shay'a, and he stretched forth your hands in allegiance to me, that you will not associate partners with Allah, that you will not steal, that you will not fornicate, that you will not kill your children, etc. After that, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, tala ayatun nisa, he thereby recites the actual verse of women, as we said, which is in Surah Al-Mumtahina. He recites the verse. And by ittifaq, by consensus, that verse was revealed after Hudaybiyah. It's revealed after the 6th year after Hudaybiyah, the verse in and of itself. And so for the Prophet ﷺ, as in the version in Sahih Muslim, to have recited the verse, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, the verse would have had to be revealed. And the verse was revealed by ittifaq and consensus in Medina, not in Mecca. So where some people, radiallahu anhu, of the ulama, have sort of, in a sense, not seen the light, quote unquote, of what Sayyidina Ubadah radiallahu anhu warda is expressing here, is because Sayyidina Ubadah ibn Samit radiallahu anhu warda was present at all of the bay'at. He's present at bay'atul nisa, women. He's present at bay'atul haram, war. He's present at bay'atul ridwan, pleasure. And he's present at this bay'at likewise. Yani radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, as we made mention, Imam of the companions. Remember, still the context here is the love that we must have for these people who surrounded the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama from Medina to Munawwara. Inside of the first bay'ah, for example, we look at the great Imam Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Yani Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu warda, who's the Imam of Banu Najjar, and is the Imam of Banu Khazraj radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Of the things we all owe, Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu warda, is the Jum'ah. And so the Jum'ah prayer, the first person to pray Jum'ah was Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu warda. Yani before the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is in Mecca, and there's no Jum'ah inside of Mecca. And Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu warda, who's present at the first bay'ah and he's present at the second bay'ah, that when he goes back to Medina to Munawwara, he establishes the Jum'ah radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. You have no dalil whatsoever that that's from indication from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the Prophet has instructed him what to establish and how to establish. It's as if it's from one of those things that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu warda expresses so beautifully inside of Sahih Al Bukhari, yani ni'matu bid'ati hadhihi, and how beautiful a bid'ah this is. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu warda, when he was speaking about Taraweeh prayer, when he was referring to the Taraweeh prayer, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu warda, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhu warda, hakada they are. MashaAllah, subhanakallah, and that shows you how much they're aligned, yani, with the way of the heavens and the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is the way of the heavens, such that they can bring forth tashri'at, yani, they can bring forth acts that are legislated by the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before, in the evidence sense, we see it manifest upon the tongue of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We made mention of the greatest of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sayyidina Ka'ab radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, Ibn Malik, Ka'ab ibn Malik, again one of the great Imams of the Ansar radiallahu anhu warda. Anytime you recite Surah Al-Tawbah, MashaAllah, Tabarakallah, Fi Ayatul Sayf, and in it is what is the verse of the sword. Anytime you recite it, you remember saying the Ka'ab ibn Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, because the amount of that surah was revealed in relation to him radiallahu anhu warda. One of the greatest manifestations of Tawbah that the world has ever seen at the hands of Sayyidina Ka'ab ibn Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. And his son Abdul Rahman radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he used to report, this is after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that Sayyidina Ka'ab, he went blind radiallahu anhu warda. And he said when he went blind, that he said his son Abdul Rahman, he said every Jum'ah, I used to lead my father to the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to pray the Jum'ah. And he said every single Jum'ah, when I'm leading my father to pray the Jum'ah, he said, Abi kana yusalli, that's the way he said, kana yusalli ala As'ad ibn Zurara. Yani yusalli salawat, he would say salawat upon Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu warda. And maybe the ulama trying to contextualize it, because many Shafi'i fuqaha, they speak of the hurma, the impermissibility of making salawat upon anybody other than the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Infirad, yani, except with qarina, if you make salawat upon somebody, you also make salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's your Jews, and that could be mamduh. But to single out somebody, and they say it's haram. But the tradition here that Sayyidina Abdul Rahman, Ibn Ka'ab ibn Malik rahimahullah ta'ala relates, is that his father every Jum'ah, without fail, would make salawat upon Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. And he said it came to a point that I couldn't contain myself any further. And so I had to ask my father, Ya Abi, why is it like every single Jum'ah that you are making salawat on As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda? And then he says, because he was the first one to pray the Jum'ah. He gathered us at a place called Naqi' al-Khadamat. He gathered us at Naqi' al-Khadamat, and we prayed the Jummah behind him. Radiallahu anhu wa Rasin As'ad ibn Zurara, radiallahu anhu wa of the Imams of Bay'at al-Aqaba al-Ula, and of the Imams of Bay'at al-Aqaba al-Thani, and the first person the Prophet _sallam establishes as a leader from amongst the Ansar when they returned back to Medina, radiallahu anhu wa. And he's the first of many things. From amongst them, he is Rajih, the strongest opinion. He is the first person to die in Medina to Munawwara. The first of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ to die in Medina was Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu warda. And al ikhtilaf, the ikhtilaf is Sayyidina Uthman ibn Mad'un radiallahu anhu. Uthman ibn Mad'un al-Jumahi, the great Imam, great friend of the Prophet ﷺ in Jahiliyyah and Islam. But the stronger opinion is that the first one to die period is Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara and Sayyidina Uthman ibn Mad'un radiallahu anhu al-Jumahi. He is the Qurayshi, and he is the first of the Muhajirun to die in Medina to Munawwara, buried in Baqi'. Prophet ﷺ baka. The Prophet ﷺ cried and said, Uthman ibn Mad'un, radiallahu anhu warda, inna bi mufaraqatika la mahzununa. He says, with your departure, we're in a state of grief and sorrow. The Prophet ﷺ says about saying, Uthman ibn Mad'un. The first one tonight, Asad ibn Zurara, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. In Bay'at al-Thaniya, you see a great number of Imams, radiallahu anhu warda. They're going to emerge. Remember, this is a Bay'at of war. And this is over war. Where it differs from the first bay'ah is that the Ansar are going to stretch forth their hands to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam over war. That they take the oath that they will protect the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the same way they protect themselves, they protect their women, and they protect their children. And so it's a bay'ah over war, and that is one of the first times you see in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, the devil himself, Iblis, appear manifest inside the seerah due to the gravity of what has taken place at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, with these imams of war taking allegiance with the Prophet ﷺ over war. And if you look at them, radiallahu anhum wardahum, the imams anhum, they speak about 73 men. And these 73 men and 2 women, radiallahu anhu warda. And the imams in the books of ahadith and books of seerah, because of the greatness, they'll mention every single person by name, radiallahu anhu warda, who took bay'ah with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. From the rijal, these are the ones who are going to fulfill their oath, because they are going to protect the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with their own lives. It is something very, very unique to the actual Ansar in and of themselves. Now, we have the riwayat of the like of Sayyidina Talha ibn Ubaidillah at-Taymi radiallahu anhu warda, who protects the Prophet at Yawm al-Uhud. And to the point he's like a kunfuba, he's like a hedgehog, yani. He has that many arrows inside of his back where he's protected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said he was like a hedgehog, yani, the living martyr. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of the Imams, the 10 who's guaranteed paradise. But by and large, the most of them who will be around the actual the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Ansar themselves. And the Ansars are tilqa'i, and they run to the Prophet ﷺ. In the tradition that Sayyidina Talha radiallahu anhu warda, it's Abu Bakr who shouts him out. Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Talha and his brother, same tribe, Banu Taym radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. And then Sayyidina Abu Bakr, who's far from the Prophet ﷺ, he begins, Dunaka Talha, get to the Prophet ﷺ. And so Talha is instructed by Abu Bakr to get to the Rasul ﷺ in Uhud, and to protect the Prophet ﷺ. The Ansar, khalas, they're just there, yani. The Ansar, they don't need anybody to remind them of the bay'ah, the allegiance that they took, which was to protect the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that regard. And from amongst them, because you can stress many of them, amongst them, you stress in it in Nasiba, radiallahu anha warda. When she's there, she has her husband whose name is Zayd bin Asim, radiallahu anhu warda, and she's with Zayd bin Asim who's taken bay'ah, the bay'ah of war. And as she calls her husband and says, because she's there with her husband, right? She says, how are we going to miss out on this? Go and ask the Prophet ﷺ, likewise, can we take the allegiance with the Rasul? And saying Zayd bin Asim, radiallahu anhu warda, goes and asks the Prophet ﷺ, informs the Rasul, saying it's Nasiba, radiallahu anha warda, how to say it, the Prophet grants permission. And so the saying that Nasiba bint Ka'ab, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, and saying that Asma bint Amr, two women, they take bay'ah with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi sallam over war. Yani Peri bila munaza', the greatest warrior of women amongst the companions is this great woman saying to Nasiba radiallahu anha warda. Uhud, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will single out Nasiba خير من فلان وفلان وفلان. The Prophet said she was greater on that day than so and so from the man, and so from the man, and so from the man. We'd already made mention that she defends the Prophet from Abdullah ibn Qamiya, هذا أقماه الله. She defends him, a gash that she has, which relates to the mother of Sa'ad ibn Rabi'a. Dawaytuhu sana. She said, like, I treated her for an entire year, the gash that she had. But he gave her one, and she gave him darabat in the tradition. There's darabat radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, that she falls into an unconscious state. Radiallahu anha wardaha. And the riwayah that she wasn't even there, khalas, in order to engage in war inside of the battle of Uhud. She wasn't there for war, she was just there for tadawi. She was there in order to treat, alongside Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha wardaha, to treat those who were injured in Uhud. And then somebody comes over to the Siba, and they just tell her, khalas, your son's just been killed. And one of his sons was martyred. She's like, man, who? And who was the one who killed him? And when they told who was the one who killed him, khalas, that's it. She just dressed for war, went into battle, facing, she kills the person who kills his son. Radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. And then the rest of that great woman becomes history. And khalas, mashallah, tabarak Allah. I don't really want to sort of, but I was going to use a statement and flip it, but khalas, I'll leave that maybe a lack of bit of adab with the great woman radiallahu anha wardaha. But that is a warrior of the highest caliber, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha, who goes to war on behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And from her family, she raises their sons. And one of his sons is called Abdullah ibn Zayd, and another one of his sons, Abdullah ibn Zayd, the hadith of wudu. The hadith of wudu, Abdullah ibn Zayd, that's the son of Nasiba to Zayd bin Asim, and then likewise also Habib ibn Zayd, and that Habib, very, very famous. He's of those who the Prophet ﷺ sends to engage Musaylim al-Kadhab. Okay, they go to the Imaan alongside Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As and others, in order to engage, pass the edge into the Imaan, and then thereby to engage Musaylim al-Kadhab. And then on the way back, Musaylim al-Kadhab and his people, that they surround Habib, the son of Nasiba, and then what? Most of them flee who were with Sayyidina Habib, including Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As. They all flee and they escape with their lives. And then two are going to be captured. Two of them are going to be captured. Amongst them, Habib and another one of the companions, radiallahu anhu warda. And so Musaylim al-Kadhab, the liar prophet, one of the Dajjajila, one of the face of the Dajjajila, of those 30 antichrists that the Prophet ﷺ made mention of, Hakada Musaylim al-Kadhab, he's saying to Habib, who is Muhammad? And he's asking, who is Muhammad? And he says, Muhammad Rasulullah. Muhammad is the messenger of God. Hakada Sayyidina Habib bin Zayd, and he says, وَمَنْ أَنَا? Who am I? And he says, who am I? He says, I'm deaf. Can't hear what you're saying. Hakada he says, you can't hear. I like, who's Muhammad? Muhammad Rasulullah. Muhammad is the messenger of God. وَمَنْ أَنَا? Hakada the liar prophet says, who am I? And he's deaf, can't hear what you're saying, can't hear. Hakada is going. And Musaylim al-Kadhab, forget this one, Musaylim al-Kadhab. Look, Musaylim al-Kadhab kills him udwan. And he's going to chop him up, torture him, chop him limb by limb. Hakada Musaylim al-Kadhab kills Sayyidina Habib radiallahu anhu warda. That there, as we said to you before, Sayyidina Nasiba has a history. And Sayyidina Nasiba, when news reaches about the martyrdom of his son Habib, khalas, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until ayam nudawilaha bayna nas. As Allah ta'ala says, these are the days that we alternate amongst people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And that's why when Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu warda, he unleashes Sayyidina Khalid Walid and the army of the companions, Banu Hanifa, the Najd, against Musaylim al-Kadhab, which is the most difficult battle they say that the Sahaba engaged in, which becomes what's known as the Battle of the Garden. The Battle of the Garden, and that's where Musaylim al-Kadhab meets his fate. Al-Ikhtilaf, there's a difference of opinion who killed Musaylim al-Kadhab. Okay, opinion, Nasiba herself. That's what we want, Nasiba. Opinion number 2, Abdullah ibn Zayd, the son of Nasiba. Okay, opinion number 3, Wahshi ibn al-Harb. And the ulama, they join between the three of them is that it's Nasiba and his son, Abdullah ibn Zayd, who attack Musaylim al-Kadhab simultaneously with swords. And he khalas, two-pronged attack. They just attack Musaylim al-Kadhab. And as they're attacking him with swords, Wahshi sends the actual, he sends the rumh right into Musaylim al-Kadhab. And he kills simultaneously by three steel. On that day, he said, likewise, she took like 13 blows and he gashes inside of her. Radiallahu anha. That's the great Nasiba. But the point is, sadaqat, that she fulfilled the covenant that she took with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم over war, the covenant of war, mashallah, tabarakallah, that great woman, radiallahu ta'ala anha, wardaha. And a great number of them, mashallah, tabarakallah, the Ansar, they emerge, mashallah, tabarakallah, from those oaths that they take with the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And a brief look at the tradition in and of itself, that saying, Ubadah ibn Samit, radiallahu anhu, wardah, he was of those, as the hadith mentions, he witnessed Badr, he was present at the battle of Badr alongside the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa kullul mashahid. All of the wars of prophecy, he stands alongside the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of the wars of prophecy, and that's the great number of those who took the oath. Every war of prophecy that they were present in. Radiallahu ta'ala anhum warḍahum. And he is one of those great notables upon the night of Aqaba, which we said that refers to what in terms of the allegiances, it refers to that which is the 12th year as well as the 13th year. That the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qala وَحَالُهُ عُسَابًا مِنْ أَصْحَابِهِ, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he's surrounded by a group of his companions sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The word in the Arabic language, isaba here, between 10 and 40, number who were surrounding the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And as we've seen, the dominant opinion here that this is after Fath Mecca. It's not taking place in Mecca, inside the Meccan period of Islam, but it's taking place in the Madani period of Islam. Fath Mecca, remember, the 8th year, 10th of Ramadan, the liberation of Mecca takes place in the Madani period, in Medina to Munawwara after the Hijrah. Bay'uni, the Prophet ﷺ said, take the oath of allegiance with me, ala la tushriku billahi shay'a, that you will not associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do ulama understand this as shirk al-khafi? They understand this as subtle shirk, not al-jili, not major shirk, not idolatry. Because the Sahaba radiallahu anhu wa gone cleanse their heart from any type of idolatry radiallahu anhu wa. And so them radiallahu anhu wa, it's about the issue of riyah. I can understand this, that the Prophet has taken bay'ah with them over the disease of the heart, which is ostentation, which is known as riyah radiallahu anhu wa. Like saying Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu wa, he says it's like a black ant upon a black stone in the blackest of nights. He says radiallahu anhu wa, the subtlety of riyah, of ostentation, that you act for ulterior motive, you act in order to be seen and recognized by other than him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet has taken a bay'ah with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum warḍahum over one of the diseases that is from the very fabric of the human soul. Very fabric, Araftum, it's of the last things that the human being can uproot from their heart in and of itself. And you can have people, mashallah, in the deen munawwarun, people of light, and still they're struggling, they're at war with the issue of riyah, of the issue of recognition of others. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for safety and security in that regard. And so here, the first thing, the issue of shirk, is about riyah, which is acting for an ulterior motive. وَلَا تَسْرِقُوا. Likewise, not to steal. Sahaba not to steal, radiallahu anhu, waradahum. Oath of allegiance with the Rasul, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, over, not stealing. And this often, these bay'at are not necessarily for the Sahaba, radiallahu anhu, waradahum, but when the Sahaba, they become the paradigm for each and every single person thereafter. Okay, that's how we know the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you'll see when Islam begins to engage the a'ajaim, when Islam begins to engage the non-Muslims, then these attributes that the Sahaba have cleansed themselves from, you'll see it prevalent inside of those people who knew into the state of Islam. It's like saying Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu warda, when saying Umar ibn al-Khattab, he unleashes him on Iraq, Iraq and Halwan, saying Sa'd anhu warda, they built that city which is called Kufa. So Kufa, that great city of Islam, it was built by Sayyidina Sa'd and Sayyidina Utbah ibn Ghazwan radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. And initially when they built Kufa, they build it as what? They build it as sort of tents, So it's like tents, settlements, temporary settlements. And then what? Then they write to Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu warda, seeking for permission. What? To move from temporary accommodation to build permanent accommodation. And so why? For what reason? They said because sariqa, theft, has now become rampant inside of Kufa. And that's what the Prophet wanted from the ajaim. And the people just robbing the Sahaba. The Sahaba busy in issues of war when they leave the encampment, and the people just come in and pillage, they pillage the actual goods of the Sahaba. And so Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu then gives them permission to actually have first, when they built tents, he said fire spread, so they have fire spread amongst them, okay? Temporary accommodation, so they asked permission from Umar to build permanent accommodation. So when they build permanent accommodation, it's like Adobe type houses, but it has windows, no glass windows, no doors or what have you, that people gone rob the houses of the companions radiallahu anhum. So they were seeking permission from Umar ibn al-Khattab in Medina, in the age of Umar to now sort of secure their houses with doors or what have you radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And it's in that context you see the sort of great narrative of the Imams radiallahu anhu of the Ansar radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Maslama radiallahu anhu, one of the elder of the companions, of the only people who bore the same name as the Prophet Muhammad, Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Maslama radiallahu anhu, azim, that is one of the greatest individuals that are around the Prophet ﷺ. The personal bodyguard of the Prophet ﷺ, an enforcer for the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why Umar ibn Khattab uses him as a bodyguard and as an enforcer, Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Maslama. So when there were issues, Sayyidina Umar would send Muhammad ibn Maslama by himself, radiallahu anhu warda. And from the Gharaib, there's a few companions, Imam Al in the Sirah Alam al-Nubala, he makes mention of the companions, like Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Maslama, radiallahu anhu warda, of those who were mentioned, radiallahu anhu warda, that from the day the Prophet passed away, until the day Muhammad ibn Maslama passed away, and he passes away in the age of Sayyidina Muawiyah, and over 30 years after Khilafat al-Rashida, that he fasted mutawasila, every single day, over 30 years, until he died, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And what you understand that is an exception to tawassul as-sawm. Because when the Prophet sallallahu like in Hadith Abdullah bin Amr, prohibited it, but from companions, and they were Ansari, all Ansari companions, who were mentioned that they fasted every single day of their life, from the day the Prophet ﷺ passed away until the day they passed away. And so Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when the people of Kufa now, when they come to Hajj and they complain to Umar ibn Khattab about the leader Umar is placed in charge, who's the Imam, Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. And Umar ibn Khattab says, what's your complaint of Sa'ad? He said, Sa'ad gone put a door on his house. Yeah. That was their complaint. He said, he's put a door. Sayyidina Umar says, a door? Yeah. He said, yeah, he's got a door on his house. Yeah. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab calls someone, Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Maslama. He said, go to Kufa. The complainant saying that Sa'ad's got a door. Yeah. Sa'ad's got a door. Go. If he's got a door, burn it down. Like the Umar said, burn it down. Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Maslama goes all the way to Kufa, finds the house of Sayyidina Sa'ad, sees the door, burns down the door, and just returns back and just burnt it, torched the door. Yani. Sayyidina Muhammad radiallahu ta'ala anhu wa ardahu. Hakada. Because Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, although permission was given for the Ra'iyah, yani, for those, quote unquote, the citizens, the subject, inhabitants of Kufa, Sayyidina Umar didn't want that for the leader himself, who was Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, la taznu, and do not fornicate, The Sahaba, mashallah, tabarakallah, as we made mention in our sort of, Sahaba don't need to fornicate. The Rijal don't need to fornicate. Sahaba, mashallah, tabarakallah, men get married. Bro, good with that. That's what true men do. True men do. They get married. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala musharri'. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made marriage easy. Easy. To get married is easy. Radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa ardahum. And the Sahaba, they get married, mashallah, tabarakallah, in numbers. You don't come close to it. La taqrabu zina. Allah Ta'ala says, don't even come close to zina. Don't even come close to it. Allah Ta'ala instructs. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhu ardahum, they embrace the instruction of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu ta'ala, the covenant. Here, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ, and do not kill your children. As Allah Ta'ala in His book, He said, خَشْيَةَ الْإِمْلَاقِ, out of fear of poverty, and don't kill your children. That's what's called wa'ad. From the most evident traits of what Jahiliyyah was what was called wa'ad. As Allah Ta'ala says, الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. When the maw'uda, or the children, they would kill, bury them inside of what? Inside of hot earth. And they would say from the womb to the oven. From the womb, they would create ovens inside of earth. And they would take a newborn baby, a girl, and they just cast it inside of the oven. And killing their own children. Out of quote unquote either the fear of poverty or this whatever, fear of disgrace. You bearing the name of a girl. Kayf, kalam, as you know what I mean? Abu Fulana, to be known by your daughter. Nasallallahu salam al-afiyah. And the Arabs, mashallah, tabarakallah, mashallah, 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 in terms of the akhlaq that they had inside of Jahiliyyah, both there were issues as well. You can't just look at it in one way, but they espoused these sort of primordial character traits, mashallah, tabarakallah, that you find with the prophets. And they had it, quote unquote, that their forefathers were not warned and they were heedless, but they still had these attributes. But they also had attributes that were sayyi'a, madhmuma, that were really, really blameworthy, amongst them killing their own children. Nas'alullah salam wal afiyah. But when you think about that, look where they came from. And look where they arrived at, radiyallahu anhum wardahum, bi Rasulillah, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You hear that the sad chronicle of Umar ibn Khattab, who buried his own daughter alive. Saying Umar ibn Khattab buried her alive. And Umar ibn Khattab, this in the riwayah, when he's dug the grave and he's burying his daughter, Umar had a beard in Jahiliyyah, he had no dirt from digging the actual grave, and he's burying her alive, and as he's burying her, she's wiping the dirt off his beard, as he's burying his own daughter alive. Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Look where he came from, and look where he arrived at, radiallahu anhu warda. Like, you don't have that in the history of mankind, that type of transformation. Sister radiallahu anhu warda, he walks as a giant, literally and spiritually amongst men, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, due to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَلَا تَأْتُوا بِبُهْتَانٍ تَفْتَرُونَ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ. Lies, don't invent lies. Now, the greatest buhtan is the lie that you invent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Araftum, Allahu a'lam, Sayyidina Fakhr al-Razi, rahimahullah ta'ala, when those funny people, they began to sort of accuse Sayyidina Fakhr al-Razi. Sayyidina Fakhr al-Razi, they were saying that his wife was an adulteress. How can they spread it? They were saying that the wife of Fakhr al-Razi was an adulteress and his son was a homosexual. These funny people, they were just spreading these lies. And so Fakhr al-Razi, he takes to the minbar and he says, and these people are saying that my wife, because they couldn't engage him in rational discussion about Allah Ta'ala. So these funny people just resorted just lies, lies. And so Fakhr al-Razi, he had his rational approach. He takes to the minbar, and he said, people are going around saying that my wife's an adulteress. It's possible, isn't it? Possible, They're saying that my sons are homosexual. He said, like, possible. And he said, but for my wife to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as an adulteress, and my son to meet Allah Ta'ala as a homosexual is better than meeting Allah Ta'ala lying about him, You lying about Allah Ta'ala got a face, Allah Ta'ala got eyes, Allah Ta'ala got hands, Allah Ta'ala sits, stands, and all of that type of stuff. Nasrullah salam wa afiyah, Nasrullah. The one of them there, I won't mention his name, but mashallah, in his Nuniyah, so you can maybe get the hint by that. In his Nuniyah, he mentions that, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa, in like Surah Al-Taha, that istawa for them is Allah sits upon his throne, Allah literally sits upon his throne. And he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is al-Kabir al-Muta'al. Allah, Kabir in the Arabic language, he wants to translate it as big. Allah's big, look, a'udhu billah. And he says, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sits upon his throne, the throne squeaks due to how heavy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. You gotta laugh, Sharr al-Baliyya yudhak, That is just a calamity that is comical, That you actually gonna believe that. About the Lord of the world subhanahu wa ta'ala. Funny people, funny people. Okay, that's the greatest lie anybody could ever invent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that, nas'alullah salam wa afiyah, you meet Allah ta'ala lying about him, subhanallah. Or you meet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam lying about him. هكذا حديث بخاري متواتر. أصح الحديث في الوجود. The strongest hadith in existence. من كذب علي متعمدا فيتبوأ مقعده من النار. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever lies intentionally about me, let them prepare their seat in hell. How the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, hellfire full of liars. Those who lied upon Allah Ta'ala and those who lie upon the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved the people of the age. How many people now, khalas, bad breath, when they're trying to speak about the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the age in which we live in. min al-Muslimin, from the Muslims, wa min ghayr al-Muslimin, and from other, the polity of Islam likewise, that they speak about God, subhanahu, and they speak about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam lies. The day will come when they will face Allah, and the day will come when they will mahjubuna, yani. يومئذ لا محجوبون. For then they will be veiled from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then you will meet the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the shaheed. يكون الرسول عليكم شهيدا. Baka sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Abdullah bin Mas'ud recited the verse to him in Surah An-Nisa. Baka, he cried, and the messenger will be a witness against them. Hasbuka, hasbuka. Enough, enough. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, yani said, yani ولا تعصوا في معروف, and anything that is good, ma'ruf, universally known, and commanded by the Lord of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not disobey. The riwayah is said, وَلَا تَعَصُونِي, do not disobey me. Look at the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam in a bushra for the Sahaba, and you're here on the covenant that they take. كُلُّكُمْ تَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ إِلَّا مَنْ أَبَى. All of you will enter paradise except the one that refuses. Sahaba like, refuse what? What will refuse? Man, ya Rasul, who would refuse? Man ata'ani dakhala al-jannah. That whoever obeys me. Man, that's azim words, isn't it? Because you should be like someone should, whoa. Man, you mean Allah, don't you? Yani? No, man ata'ani ana. Whoever obeys me dakhala al-jannah. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But whoever disobeys me, then they have refused. Refused, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Raftum, you refusing to enter into paradise? Like you quote unquote want that on your CV? Raftum, print that one, innit? I refuse to enter into paradise through disobedience of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. People gotta get sensible in this life, yani. Because life is fleeting, yani. Life is fleeting. And mashallah, Allah Ta'ala, and He blessed yani, people of old, brothers telling me of people yani, on their way to Fajr, like brothers of age, yani, of our type of age, brothers who can die on the way to Fajr. Alhamdulillah, on the way to Fajr. All we're trying to demonstrate in that is life is short. Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, like death, we don't know when it's going to be, do we? We don't know where it's going to be, but we know it's in ambush. We know it's an ambush. Death coming, kullu nafs dha'iqatul maut. We gotta straighten ourselves up, yani, before Azrael and his a'wan, yani, and his a'wan, afwan kashif again, yani, and his a'wan, before they turn up upon our doorstep. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when they turn upon our doorstep, وَهُوَ رَاضٍ عَنَّا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased in our state due to the fact that we're those muti'een, we're those people who obey Rasulahu sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. فَمَنْ وَفَى مِنْكُمْ فَأَجْرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ. The one who fulfills all of this, then his reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what a reward! And what a reward that these people who fulfill the covenant will get from Him Jalla fil Ula. وَمَنْ أَصَابَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ شَيْئًا فَعُوقِبَ فِي الدُّنْيَا فَهُوَ كَفَّارَةٌ لَهُ. But whoever any of these, which they relate to issues of hudud, yani, of capital punishment, so whoever sins in a way such that they're convicted, quote unquote, in the judiciary, yani, then the Prophet ﷺ says that it's a kafara, it's an expiation for them, yani, expiation. And the ulama, lahum kalam, yani, they have kalam in relation to that. وَمَنْ أَصَابَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ شَيْئًا فَسَتْرَهُ اللَّهُ فَهُوَ إِلَى اللَّهِ. But whoever does it, and he commits the crime, and Allah veils him, then his affair is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yani yawmul qiyamah. And the sin has not been expiated. Not been expiated. That's such a person, that's like the age in which we live in. We are in the age of the sattar, the sattar of the sattar, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is veiling the sins that we do. You can take, yani, pretty much say like an average believer. What about the issue of what? Of shirk? Khafi. Okay. What about the issue of theft? Now you can take an average believer, yani, araftum. What about the issue of what? Of fornication, adultery, hatta. Okay. I'm sure you can take an average, yani. And every one of us, for Allah Ta'ala alam, you can touch somebody, maybe it's even yourself in it, but you can touch somebody who's characterized by such sins, isn't it? You know, people who lie, yani, lie. But in the age of satar, in the age when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you commit adultery, Allah ta'ala and cast you into earth and cast stones at you, subhanah. that Allah Ta'ala has veiled you in that regard. Allah Ta'ala veiled you from the whip as a fornicator. Allah Ta'ala veiled you from the whip as a liar, as sahib al-qadh, or the like. Allah Ta'ala veiled, cutting off your hands, show off. We got hands. And how many of us, that's what Allah Sallallahu Alaihi when we don't live in Islamic State, Islamic State, Islamic State. You'd be in a state if you were in an Islamic State. You liar, you thief, you fornicator, you. That's what Allah Sallallahu Alaihi. Sure, they tell us there, these people, these are different types of funny people. These are different funny people. Those funny people, clandestine, all of those. These undercover, what have you, who are monitoring people, okay? So what they say, when they monitor all these people who shout Islamic State or what have you, you know what they say? That these people just, they talk about Islam, they're sinners. He said all they do after time is watch pornography. That's what they say. They just watch pornography on the internet, they're watching pornography, they're all engaging in fraud and all of that type of stuff. Then they're saying Islamic State and all of that. They funny people, And both sides, they're funny. The ones who are spying on them, the ones who are spying on them, and the ones who are being spied on. Are you funny, That's what Allah Sallallahu Alaihi. The last place you want to live in is an Islamic State. That's the last place you ain't cleansed yourself, you haven't cleaned up your house yet, Medina, the state, comes after Mecca, You get the point? Mecca, you got to clean your house up. You got to clean your heart up. عرفتم as Allah subhanahu ألم يأن الذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق. That there, that's خلاص. After 13 years, ulama say, okay, Allah Ta'ala revealed that in Surah Al-Hadid. After all those in Mecca of people being killed, ostracized, tortured, abused, and what have you, hakada, all the balayat that Allah Ta'ala brought upon the Sahaba, so that they cleansed their hearts. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, and they were fitting citizens of Medina to Munawwara, radiallahu. May Allah Ta'ala renders us citizens of Medina to Munawwara. Haqiqatan, jalla jalaluhu ta'ala. Funny people, funny, Araftum. And who needs Dave Chappelle when we know in the Ummah, we got some characters in it, You could just listen to the chronicles of some of the characters in this deen, and they will keep you laughing all night, Often we're not laughing out of, mockery, laughing at the calamity. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the safety and security, inshallah ta'ala. And in these days that we have, because khalas, durus light from a perspective, but in these days in sujood, make dua for them, That is not the people, funny people, take it to Allah ta'ala, make dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yuslih al-ummah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectifies the ummah. But these people who are doing atrocities in the age in which we live in, worst people were in the age of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum warḍahum, and they came good. And how many of them came good due to the dua of one of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Hakada. Maybe. Allah. Sometimes it's not even about the person. It's just about the time, or it's about the place, the masjid. That you did in sujood, Ya Allah. Are you praying for the ummah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Like he did, ummati. And he came. Which one of us, we ask, how many of us have prayed for this ummah? How many of us have prayed for funny people? How many of us prayed for not so funny people? How many du'as have we made for the ummah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? And the ummah in the short sense, is ijaba, and the ummah in the narrow sense, and in the broader sense, ummah to da'wah, the non-Muslims as well. The people talk about, I'm gonna do da'wah. You're going to do what, You go do da'wah. You ain't even made dua before da'wah. You never even, that person you want to call to Allah Ta'ala, you never mentioned him. And that's shirk khafina. You calling him to whom, Really to Allah Ta'ala, I've got 5 shahadas that people took the deen upon my hands. Your hands what, Your hands what, Arafto? You gotta like sort of cleanse those eyes a bit, That ain't you. Alhamdulillah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses you, but to attribute it to you, من وجد خيرا فليحمد الله ومن وجد غير ذلك فلا يلومن إلا نفسه. That whoever finds good, let them praise Allah. But whoever finds other than that, then they should only blame themselves. Hakada. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, inshallah. Tabarakallah. Do we have any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Any questions? No, marhaba.
Sheikh, earlier you said my companions are like the stars. What was the rest of the variation?
Whichever one of them you take as a guide, you will be guided by them. Whichever one of them you follow, you'll be guided by them. Any questions? No?
Yesterday you mentioned a hadith that explained beautiful character, one of them being forgiving those who wrong you. Do we understand forgiveness in this sense that you don't hold them to account, you pardon them, but you also take away the grudge that you may develop towards that person because of it?
You take away the what, sorry?
The grudge you may have inside.
Yeah, of course. That's afu, different from maghfirah or samaha. And afu here, the af is to efface, like you wipe it out. Yeah. So it's like what we say in English. It's to forgive and to forget.
Okay.
That's what afu is. So we're using ta'afu an man zalamaka. Now, any questions, inshallah? Say again? What? No, خلاص شريعة يعني. You can't start making up your own court يعني. You can't make up your own court. The court of expiation, you can't do that يعني. You're in the age, by and large, you're in the age of setter. The age when Allah Ta'ala is veiling يعني. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has not established conditions where people are going to be taken to account in this world for the transgressions of the law. And so, how do you counterbalance that, or in a better way, how do you show shukr for that? Tawbah, tawbah, istighfar, tawbah. As in Aisha, it says, blessed is the one upon Yawm al-Qiyamah. In their book, they find a lot of istighfar. She says, blessed is that one. And that's why we should be people constant in the state of istighfar. The Rasul was 100 times a day, wala dhanbala. And he has no sin 100 times a day in the state of istighfar, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They would hear under the breath of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So people should become people of istighfar, people of tawbah. Jahiliyyah yani. Jahiliyyah, so before Islam. So it was the culture of the Arabs. The culture of the Arabs was to bury their daughters, not the sons, to bury their daughters. Sometimes it was due to issues of poverty, other times it's due to issues of pride. You get the point. So poverty, they believed that they couldn't afford to maintain. They couldn't afford to maintain. And then other times, and that's what you see from the great people of Jahiliyyah, saying that Zayd bin Amr ibn Nufail, who's the uncle of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, the uncle. The father of Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Zayd, the one of 10 who's guaranteed paradise. That he, radiallahu anhu, in Jahiliyyah, when he knew like the poor families in and around Mecca al Mukarramah, and that when he heard that they had a baby, and he ascertained that they had a baby daughter, he would go to that house and knock upon the door and say, give me the girl, don't kill the girl, give me the girl. And this is how you distinguish between poverty and pride. So those that are of poverty, they would give their daughters to say the Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufail. And so he'd be raising all of these sorts of young girls until they reach the age of puberty. And when they reach the age of puberty, then he would take the girls now at pubescent back to their families and say, sure, if it was the issue of poverty has been sorted out and now you want your daughter, here's your daughter, I've raised her all these years. But if you don't want it, then khalas, you can leave it with me, and then khalas, you continue to look after her, mashallah. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Yub'ath ummah, he's raised Yawm al-Qiyamah as an entire nation by himself. That was Jahiliyyah, subhanAllah. Zayd bin Amr bin Nawf, Imam Al Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, has an entire chapter upon it, a man in Jahiliyyah, and in Makarim al-Akhlaq, Ghariba, subhanAllah. No, definitely not. And with the Prophet ﷺ, you always sort of, you've got to be a sound i'tiqad of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ tahir mutahhir, Prophet is pure outwardly, what I mean outwardly, physically. As we made mention of, when people drinking the urine of the Prophet and the blood of the Prophet ﷺ, why the hukm of it is pure. And the Prophet ﷺ, I don't even want to use the word even more so, but the Prophet is pure to his core, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And that must be a starting point when you're trying to understand the actions of Nubuwwah, the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, a great number of the Imams, they say that the Anbiya, the Prophets, they're from, the acts of the Prophets are from what we call the Mutashabihat. And the Mutashabihat, it's here, obscure, you get the point, ambiguous. Not easy for you to understand what the action of a prophet does. A prophet, general, the ulama say, فكيف بنبينا صلى الله عليه وسلم, how then about our prophet صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. Now, one thing you do know, Prophet ain't bearing no grudge. Kind of get the point. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is definitely not bearing no grudge. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The grudge, then where's the grudge with Jubayr ibn Mut'im? The one who sort of raises Wahshi, you get the point, and sanctions the assassination of Sayyidina Hamza, is Sayyidina Jubayr ibn Mut'im, Sahaba Jaleel, radiyallahu anhu warda. You don't hear anything there with Sayyidina Jubayr ibn Mut'im. When look at the Prophet, we made mention of Sayyidina Hind bint Utbah. The Prophet could have had that woman struck, could have had her struck, neck struck, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And there she comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If Hind bint Utbah comes to you, as if the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he sees behind his head. Never mind what's in front of him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. You like that munaqaba, if Hind bint Utbah comes to you, will you give her tawbah? And he knows who you are, and he gave you tawbah. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam embraced you, Prophet never struck Sayyidina Hind, when the command was to. So the ulama say with Wahshi ibn al-Harb shay, or often that we took directly from our teacher, Wahshi ibn al-Harb, there's something there, You get the point that the eye of Nubuwwah sees, and the faqir, we can go into it, but rather not, You get the point. But what you must know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the eye of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la tukhti, doesn't make a mistake. The eye of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sees what he sees, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But usually, there are, and this is important in terms of adab, because when we're speaking about love of the companions, adab is the companions, never mind the Prophet ﷺ, there are areas, as it relates to the life and times of the companions, it is better, for the masses to stay clear of those areas inside of their lives, are often really better for you to avoid that type of conversation. Sahaba are complex, they're very complex. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ is far more complex than them combined. That's why we say those type of things, better to stay clear of them. But always your i'tiqad, your belief of the Prophet ﷺ.
How do we understand about the Ansari who established the Jum'ah in Medina with one of the forefathers of the Prophet who used to tell the people about, on a Friday, tell the people about. So would that not necessarily mean that one of the forefathers of the Prophet was the first to establish like a
يوم العروبة يوم العروبة يوم الجمعة, and they gathering them at the Kaaba, the door of the Kaaba, and the Jum'ah on the Friday, straight after the Zenith. That's there. But we're talking about in the deen of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The deen is legislation inside the religion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's an important point because remember the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a way of a continuum, and so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes at the end of a continuum sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the continuum is two-pronged, very important. The continuum is two-pronged. The continuum is what? The continuum of the Prophets themselves. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the great edifice in Al Bukhari, he completes that edifice. But the Prophet ﷺ also completes the continuum of the Arabs themselves. Okay, and that's very, very important. Often, people they make this stuff like fiqh baqaran or what have you. They're trying to look as an example at the law, Shari'at al-Mutahara, fiqh al-Islami, as it relates to the legislation of the previous ummah, in particular the Mosaic law in and of itself. People, to the day people tell us, Allahu A'lam, Hanafi and all that stuff, to tell us the Hanafi fiqh 90% Mosaic, they'll tell you some fiqh maqar, will tell you that that they could find the precedence inside the Mosaic law in and of itself, the Talmudic law. Yani, but Allahu Alam, there's also an interesting continuum that not many an eye has been shed upon, which the continuum of the Arabs themselves. Things that were not part of the ways of the previous prophets, at least what has come down to us, but they were clearly part of the way of Jahiliyyah. And that the Prophet of the Arabs in Jahiliyyah, rather, should say that, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to legislate that inside the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's another continuum, a more subtle continuum that is there. And so one could understand that in terms of Arub, in terms of the Jum'ah in and of itself, okay? That we see it in Jahiliyyah, but it's going to be legislated at the hands of Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu in terms of the deen legislation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Naam. No, well, yeah, that's another discussion. I never said that. The Faqih never said that today. Yeah. No, that's Musaylim al-Kadhab. The Prophet ﷺ, and he spoke in the Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that there are going to be 30 odd Dajjals, 30 odd Antichrists in the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the ulama radiallahu anhum have investigated who are these sort of these figures, these imposters that have manifested in the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. The last of them, as the Prophet ﷺ said, will be the Antichrist himself. But he's the last of that continuum. And so when you look at the very beginning of the continuum, you're going to gravitate towards this individual called Musaylima al-Kadhab, Rahman al-Yamama, as he called himself, okay? The beneficent of Yamama, of the Najd. That's what we were speaking about. He was the one who killed Habib bin Zayd, the son of Nusayba, tortured him. Naam.
What was the age difference between Sayyidina Rasulullah and
Allah Alam, what Allah Alam, age difference between them. Allah Alam. Well, he's, Allah Alam.
Was he younger?
No, he's younger than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's without a shadow of a doubt.
Do you know his name after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Say again?
Do you know if he was named after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
No, Allah Alam, not heard that. It could have been the case. And a lot of the Sahaba, like when they engaged, and he could have been named by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not something necessarily that comes that we see. But a lot of the Sahaba, the names that we know them by were names the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them. Like Abu Bakr is called Abdullah. The Prophet gave him his name Abdullah. Some say his name used to be Abdul Ka'ba. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. We looked at Sayyidina Amr ibn As, Abdullah ibn Amr, one of the great companions. His name is Abdullah ibn Harith. Abdullah ibn Harith. He said a close friend of ours died, and we were by the grave site, and he died. We were about to bury him, and the Prophet ﷺ comes. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to Abdullah, he's later known as Abdullah ibn Harith. The Prophet said, "What's your name?" And he said, As. Okay, like Al-As ibn Wa'il, like Amr ibn As. He said, "My name's As." And so then the Prophet ﷺ looks at Abdullah ibn Amr. Now, Abdullah ibn Amr we spoke about. He said, "Masmuka, what's your name?" He said, As. His name was As as well. And so then the Prophet ﷺ looks at Abdullah ibn Amr. And I said, "What's your name?" He said, As. All three of them are called As. And that's all the names. As of the meanings it creates disobedience in Asi. It can have a hint of disobedience. That's not a good name to have. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Khalas, get down to the grave." And so they all three they jumped down to the grave to bury their friend, to arrange them. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, "These are all called Abdullah. Okay, change your name to Abdullah." All of them called Abdullah. And so they said, "We went into the grave called As, and we came out of the grave called Abdullah." They said, so Allah Alam would say, Allah Alam, the Faqirs never say anything about Sayyidina Muhammad al-Maslama, about the name, how we got the name. And we know that there were individuals around the time of the Prophet they make mention of who were called by the name Muhammad. And obviously the parents had the hope and knowledge that the final Prophet was quote unquote about to be born, that they wanted to expose themselves to that naf'al of Allah Ta'ala. So they call their children Muhammad. So we do know on the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, you're having people being called Muhammad ﷺ. What I'm trying to inform you, independent of the Prophet ﷺ. But due to knowledge that the age of that name had arrived. Okay? Allah Alam Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Aslam. Questions, inshallah ta'ala?
I'm not sure if I missed it. You know the Sahaba when they were in Kufa, why did they have a problem with Sa'd ibn Muqas's door?
Because people want 24-hour access. Yeah. That's the whole point. They see the door as a barrier between him and the people. Yeah. They love to. Subhanallah. And it's not like saying that Sa'd wasn't walking amongst them, wasn't guiding them. Just hakada. Of them, subhanallah. So people strange, like a door, subhanallah. Any questions, inshallah? Na'am. Yeah, of course. Bayan, mashallah, tabarakallah, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the deen to the end times, bay'ah. Of some informed us of the bay'ah of the Mahdi right there. And between the Rukn and Maqam, that the Mahdi himself will take bay'ah. Mashallah, tabarakallah. And the tradition there, the people who take bay'ah, the initial people to take bay'ah, they come out of Europe. Mashallah, hadith al-Hib, we take the bay'ah with the Mahdi, the first people right there when the Mahdi first manifests. And so bay'ah in the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the age of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so the bay'ah is with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The bay'ah with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But obviously, especially after and likewise in the era of the Khulafa al-Rashideen, who represent ala manhaj al-nubuwah, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in Hakim, the Mustadrak, they're on the way of prophecy. But then thereafter, then you start seeing the whole thing divide to what you call, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasulah wa ulil amri minkum. With ulil amri minkum, al-ulama wal-umara. And so you see a split in the ummah between political leadership and spiritual leadership. You get the point? And there's going to be bay'ahs manifested in both lines. People who give bay'ah allegiance to people of political authority, but likewise, people who give bay'ah unto people of spiritual authority. And obviously that exists until the day in which we live in. Okay? No, I don't recommend the top 10, you want a top 10 recommendations? Like that. It's all good, Hamza, it's all good, khalas. Inshallah ta'ala. Salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, make a lot of salawat. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah ta'ala guide you to him, to your recommendation, inshallah ta'ala. Huh? You might have found it? You might have. We with Sheikh Bilal, you're going to take a bow with Sheikh Bilal. Inshallah, we hope you have found it, inshallah ta'ala. Men jadda wa jad, they say, whoever's serious will find whatever they're looking for, More than one, like wives, you got put it like that. 4. Sheikh Bilal, inshallah, he will promise you, he's going to promise you, inshallah ta'ala, a dars upon bay'ah, inshallah ta'ala. He's going to give you a dars on it, inshallah. It'll become a lot clearer, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala?
Sheikh, on a level, bay'ah for barakah, that exists, is it? And
bay'ah, khalas, the age, like, Allah ta'ala, you get the mirroring in the split, the umara and the umara, as well as the ulama, and that's in the issue of bay'ah. You have to be careful. In the same way, you'd be careful of giving bay'ah to the umara, to political authority. You'd be careful of that, wouldn't you? Same way, but even more so, you should be careful of giving bay'ah in the spiritual sense, You get the point. What I mean, be careful. You got to be sure, that person is duly qualified to give bay'ah to. You've got to be very, very sure in that regard. You don't have what? I don't understand it. No, you just can't choose here. That's the way, you just can't choose. Say again?
Oh,
you don't have one. That's why you say men jadda wajad, and whoever sort of is serious, you'll find what you're looking for. Now, all of us should be in search of that one we stretch our hands forth to. We should be in search of that. Because that there is security for religion and it's advancement in religion. Really, really important from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But all the faqirs make a mention of, just be careful in the age in which we live in. You get the point? Because khalas, the age of Dajjal really has arrived. They're imposters. Many guys is and so you should really, really be careful in that regard. But remember that because of the imposters, like at the age of the Antichrist, when the Antichrist manifests, it doesn't mean Jesus is not Jesus, alayhi salam. You get the point? That's really, really important. Just because you're in the age of imposters doesn't mean the true heirs, inheritors of the Prophet are not present. They are present, mashallah, tabarakallah. But make sure you get to them, you reach them. And it's the same way, okay, how do we know Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal? How do you know Imam Shafi'i? How do you know Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Abu Hanifa, Rahimullah, Yahya ibn Ma'in, Ali al-Madini? How do you know these great people, radiallahu anhum wa rada'ahum? Through the people. You get the point? So you know who is true by reaching people who are true. They'll tell you who they are, who the truth is in the age in which we live in. Okay? But when the one who say this will find what they're looking for, inshallah.
So you say, Sheikh, that you can't achieve the tenderness of the heart, people loves without having that guy and that veil.
Never say never, but extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. You never say never. Khalas. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works through means, Allah ta'ala works without means, Allah works against means, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you never say never. Well, hukm al-ghalib, what is normative, is that people achieve purity and cleansing through his people, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay?
It's through people without the veil.
Like
so you can still, sit with you, go through maybe the tariqah and processes, but without that with the veil.
Say again?
I'm confused, I'm sorry. It's something else I've heard of in the past. Some people take very on people on just like they have whatever, You learn actually, like you just said, that any shaykh, anybody who you think is who's qualified to do so.
No, learning of people is one thing. We're not speaking about learning of them. It's not speaking about like teachers who are teaching you law, teaching you theology, maybe even teaching you spirituality.
Islamically, but listening to your bayan about the bayah, the third one, that's really important, and it took bayah with the Prophet peace be upon him 3 times. So that's why I'm asking you the question.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds serious that we should take bayah.
Yeah, no doubt, but you got to find who to take bay'ah with first and foremost. That's all the faqir is sort of presenting here. The bay'ah is very, very serious, and it's part and parcel of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you have to hadar, you have to be careful in the age in which we live in, especially the island upon which we live. You get the island in which we live, and the age in which we live in, these trends and fashions and what have you. Next man comes in with a green turban, that's the sheikh of the time. This one comes in with a red one, khalas, he must be the new one. And then, you know what I mean? Khalas. It's like anyone comes in with a turban, and you get the point, everyone stretching their hands. Be careful, often. The deen is not a fad, deen is not a trend, nor are his people.
Yeah, so you stretch your hand to someone, then what happens after that? What's the process?
No, that's what the question is referring to. It's purification and cleansing of your heart. That's what it is. And these are guides to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only people who can guide you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones who have reached Him. Those who have reached Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they know the path. We're not speaking in some type of esoteric way, but they know how to wade through and to circumvent all of these obstacles that exist between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And often those people, mashallah, but they are a type of rarity in the age in which we live in. When we see the edifice that the Prophet ﷺ and his people built, we see it like crumbling before our very eyes in the age in which we live in. And so the true people of religion, they are few and far between in this age. That's a different thing, whether it's a secret or not secret.
No, I mean like his brother used to compare with some sheikh
Naam.
Check in the look at that mentioned or character about the Islam, when people are hatred towards them, they show in more love towards them. Is there any other example of good character that Islam had that can share with us?
He's saying, is there any good character that the Ansar had that you can share with us? So one of the characteristics of the Ansar that made them beloved to the Prophet was that they embraced the Prophet when they first met him, as a sign that of a beautiful characteristics. He was just wondering about are there any other beautiful characteristics that the Ansar expounded?
No, we mentioned of the Ansar, mashallah ta'ala, you know, we said, you asked about the beautiful character traits of the Ansar. Yeah, I think we sort of alluded to that. Yeah, you know, when we speak about character, you can speak about character within the context as an example of the human mind, the virtues of the mind. And so we look at the Ansar, and that's why we made reference to issues of the Ansar in terms of Quran, in terms of Hifd al-Quran, the gathering of the Quran, the preservation of the Quran, in terms of the law, jurisprudence, etc. So the Sahaba of the Ansar at the highest operative level of religion intellectually, virtues, why you would love them, are often beautiful to love Abu Hanifa, but more beautiful, afwan, to love those Sahaba radiallahu anhum wardahum who achieved what Abu Hanifa achieved and then some. And then Abu Hanifa only achieved it based upon what they achieved. You understand the point I'm making? It's important in the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, very important, especially the days in which we're in, the age in which we're in, as you know, as you approach sort of the climax, quote unquote, of the human narrative, that this generation has to really connect itself with the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Paramount, great importance. We have to move, not necessarily beyond and ignoring and what have you. Great, mashallah, we are spoiled for choice of the amount of awliya and sulahat that this ummah has brought forth. But none of them are like the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And there needs to be a very radical and profound attachment to the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, whether they're Ahlul Mecca or Ahlul Medina. And so virtues of the mind, you're going to find. Virtues that relate to sort of the quality of anger, and that's why you'll see them ulul ba's in war there, and in bravery to a degree, radiallahu anhum wardahum. And then you look at those Imams radiallahu anhum wardahum who took bay'ah with the Prophet ﷺ, how many of them, quote unquote, live to tell their story, radiallahu anhum wardahum. They die fulfilling the covenant, radiallahu anhum wardahum, as an overwhelming group. And so bravery, and shuja', the courage, the virtues, the chronicles upon chronicles. And we're speaking to our Sayyid Nasiba today, quote unquote, a woman, but at the highest degree in terms of what? In terms of engagement in war. Or you can speak about issues of nufus, of the nafs in and of itself, third context for known character. And then you can speak about the kingdom come about them in that regard. That's why Allah Ta'ala, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَكَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصًا, that they will prefer others over themselves, although they're in dire need. We mentioned the likes of Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Rabi'a, radiallahu anhu, and Ansari radiallahu anhu, and the great chronicles of those who come, they would have a small amount of food, and somebody comes for food, and they'll blow out all the lights, and he just tells us, why, pretend we're eating. Just pretend that, just to pretend that they're eating, so they won't shame the guests. And so the only food there is for the guests, and they just pretend that they're eating, always preferring others over themselves. Radiallahu anhu wardahum. Hakada, the Ansar. So they're the three contexts. And so we're just making fleeting references of virtues that relate to those three contexts, which generally give us an understanding of what are virtues of character. But their greatest virtue, love of the Prophet ﷺ. That is the virtue of virtues, isn't it? And you know that, subhanAllah, you meet somebody, and you may not know somebody from Adam, but if that person begins to espouse to you love of the Prophet ﷺ, then you start to love him, isn't it? On the basis that he loves the Rasul, there's something that sort of just grabs your heart when you see it, that somebody loves the Prophet ﷺ. Case with the Ansar. Then okay, if you can't sort of, the modality of their love, it cannot be measured that they had for the Prophet ﷺ. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala?
We look at the difference between the way the Quraysh reacted to the message and the Ansar. But the Quraysh, the Prophet grew up in their midst, they knew his character and everything, but yet they still rejected him. And the Ansar, they were so quick, and they had that zealousness to obey the Prophet ﷺ. Do you think it was because the Jews, they were always mentioning this Prophet to come, and because of that, when they heard the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they immediately believed that message, even though many of them hadn't met him? Or was it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just put that zeal into their heart, or was it for other reasons?
I think Allah is probably closer to that. They tell us the qa'idah that the first people to reject the Prophet are Banu Ashiratihim. The first prophets are rejected by their own people. And you could move into that, in English we say familiarity breeds contempt. And so you can have contempt for somebody due to your proximity to that person. And so that there is probably a more likely sort of narrative for the Quraysh in relation to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then also, just the politics of Quraysh, the tribes, what family you're from, what house you're from, and all of that will conspire to you, like, get the point, rejecting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Ansar, no doubt, the narrative of the Jews is important, but I think Allah, it's just the heart of the people of Yemen, because you'll find that it's a consistent narrative of Yemen throughout. Arabia can wage war with the Prophet ﷺ. Yemen doesn't. The narratives of, I'm talking about beyond the Ansar, just the Yemenis, and they just embrace the Prophet ﷺ when they confront Nubuwah. And so really then it's something that we have to understand, and the Prophet Al Bukhari Muslim hadith refer to, they have very special hearts, really special hearts. And that you would have saw crystallized in the greatest of the Yemenis ever. Greatest Yemenis ever are the Ansar. They're the greatest of them ever. And it's more to do with just the nature of their souls, how they embrace the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some of them there, like radiallahu anhu warda, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram, the father of Sayyidina Jabir ibn Abdullah, the most famous of the Jabir ibn Abdullah. So his father, radiallahu anhu warda, like on Bayat al-Aqaba there, he's there, Bayat al-Aqaba al-Thaniya, he's there, he's a mushrik, This man's just a mushrik, he's a mushrik, He's gone to Hajj as a mushrik, and in some of them, the companions are like, we're going to meet this individual tonight, Prophet told to keep him in the down low, but somehow they just sort of trusted him, said we're going to go meet the Prophet, and he should come along with us. And what I'm saying, he goes, let's go. He just goes, sees the Prophet and believes, You get the point, just like it's those moments that they just engage the Prophet ﷺ, and it is over. You look at the Ansar when they write to the Prophet ﷺ, and they want the Rasul ﷺ after Bay'at al-Ula, they want the Prophet ﷺ to send them a teacher. And so the Prophet ﷺ sends in a Mus'ab ibn Umair. And Mus'ab ibn Umair goes, that is just bewildering, How saying the Mus'ab ibn Umair just goes and engages the Ansar and doesn't leave back for Mecca, say that he's converted, Medina, he converted Yathrib. But that is, it's like, Imam Al-Qatani, Abdul Hayy Al-Qatani, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he speaks about Sayyidina Anas anhu, speaking about the great character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Al-Qatani, rahimahullah ta'ala, refers that, but often, the greatness of the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can also allude to the greatness of the character of the one engaging the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Qatani, rahimahullah ta'ala, makes mention of that. And so you will see that, what I'm saying with Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umair. It's one thing to speak about Sayyidina Mus'ab ibn Umair, having conveyed Medina to Munawwara, but we should always make mention, besides Mus'ab, is As'ad ibn Zurara. Sayyidina As'ad ibn Zurara is always in Mus'ab, so he's going to play a part. But then also, just the chronicles of when, like Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, or Sa'ad ibn Rabi'ah, or Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, or Usayd ibn Hudayr, when they're engaging Mus'ab, that is a heart that is ready, You get the point? It's a very, very special heart, really special heart. And you can't, that there, it's not like the Jews got something, although that's an element, it's preparation there. But that still, in the context of that, you're still dealing with what very, very special people are after. Warriors, what, that's our warriors, what you threaten us with whom? You get into that now, you threaten us with whom? What, a prophet's going to come and assist you? Let's see about that. How can the warriors can take it? We'll take it to the battlefield. I mean, you gotta think about that. Quraysh went to the battlefield against the Prophet ﷺ. Tamim and Ghatafan, and they went against the Rasul ﷺ. Warriors, they're ready to test themselves against the best. And so the Ansar, as if the narrative which often stated, and it should always embrace that as a possible perspective, that the Ansar, like, no, we need them on side. That there, Allahu Alam, all said and done, is less of a reason why they're going to embrace the Prophet ﷺ. That's Tib and Nufus, it's really the beautiful souls that were around the Rasul ﷺ and those radiallahu anhum were down. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala now?
You said to achieve the character traits, reduce the character traits, you got to get them to go get yourself. So how is that done? Is it just like literally like forcing yourself to do it, or is there a technique, some ways that you can?
No, I mean that's durus, that's a durus, that's something else, But the ultimate way, Sharia, Sharia, and Sharia is instructions, isn't it? After you get into spirituality, then you become attuned to your nafs. You'll be able to listen to your nafs, the impulses of your nafs, what your nafs wants or what have you, and you have knowledge of the law. You can sort of put it in the light of that, not often, and then you can disobey the voice. You know, the point, voice, and the class is a long thing. Now, and he kidnapped me to get me here in the first place, I'm blocking his number, he's blocked, So Allah A'lam, Alhamdulillah, your Sheikh Bilal, Ustad Amjad and others here, mashallah, tabarakallah, old and wealthy, it's wealthy, it's among wealthy in terms of people, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. But at the same time, it's important, the issue we made mention of, Banu Ashiratihim, often familiarity breeds contempt, and often you have people amongst you who more than suffice you, but maybe because of familiarity, you're like, no, you want somebody who's not necessarily from older, you get the point? No, not often. You have people amongst you, inshallah ta'ala, abdu alayhim, inshallah, min nawajih. Hold tight to them, inshallah ta'ala.
You got your book for next year.
Your name's Naveed, isn't it? Yeah, sure. This is a tough one. This one isn't it? And then khalas, inshallah ta'ala. Make dua for the faqir and Allah gives us barakah in time. And after, subhanallah. Now,
what was the text that you mentioned about the covenant that we took with the Prophet? You mentioned there was a text that a scholar called Muhammadan covenants. Is that
Sha'arani.
Is that translated in English?
No, you got to learn Arabic, I said. Got to learn Arabic. Really important, inshallah ta'ala. That's what we hope, inshallah. We hope everybody sort of makes a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we'll learn the language of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book. We'll learn the language of his Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Subhanallah. And sometimes the faqih, we're in the majlis and we're clear, and the faqih I just look and I say, subhanallah. You feel sorry for people who are sitting and you're reading that with clear and how they're praising the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhanallah. Allahu a'lam. You should learn Arabic just to understand the witria. That day was mashallah tabarakallah. So really, people should sort of, and then when you enter into the world of the Arabic language, that's the legacy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the only language he spoke was Arabic. Just Arabic, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I got the point. So his legacy is in that language. That's the point the faqih wanted from that. And then all the ulama, mashallah, sahaba, etc. Learn Arabic. It should be a priority for all of us, inshallah, tabarakallah, to learn that language, inshallah. Inshallah ta'ala. Any questions, inshallah? I guess it's Nasheed time, innit? Has Kashif got off? Kashif. You better go home to your wife, you better break your i'tikaf.
He's not morning, he's been on Facebook Live, so I think they've blocked him.
Allah Kashif, you're going to sing for us. It's Bilal. Unless you don't want to sing today, you don't want to sing, Daddy. You can stay there if you don't want to sing, Daddy. It's good news, inshallah ta'ala. We've got just 7-8 minutes to the shraq, inshallah.